Hello, everyone. A fun story for you before we begin today's episode. About 25 years ago, I was living in Boston and I had discovered Paul Kemprecos' amazing books. I shared them with my girlfriend at the time, who's a childhood friend that I'm still friends with. So what's up, Dana? And I decided to make her this romantic present for fun. It was a fake newsletter that had a bunch of funny things in it and some private jokes. And there was a really funny section, because we were both fans of Paul's work, all about Paul Kemprecos. So on a whim, I decided to send him a copy of it because I thought it was funny, and I wasn't sure I'd get a response or not. But sure enough, about a month later in the mail, I got a letter from Paul, saying, "Thank you so much for sending me one of the most unique things I've gotten from a fan. This was hilarious. Wish you guys the best of luck." So fast forward about 25 years, and I reach out to him and say, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me or not, but about 25 years ago, I sent you this funny fake newsletter and blah, 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 blah." Anyway, he responds and says, "Of course I remember. It was great. I'd love to be on the show." Awesome. And the reason I wanted to tell you this story is because there's a quote by Steve Jobs that I love, and I'm going to read you just a part of it. It goes like this: "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever." It's a great quote. So when I look back at the dots of my own life connecting, I didn't know 20-some years ago that making a romantic gift for my girlfriend at the time would lead to a wonderful interview with a great man and a great writer on something called a podcast, a technology that at the time hadn't even been invented yet. Just think about that for a minute. I mean, how cool is that? So in closing, and to get a bit philosophical for a second, you have to believe in your journey and yourself, because you can't always see the dots that you're forming today and what they're going to become in the future. Like Steve Jobs said, have faith in your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever works for you. But just have faith in yourself, because you never know when 25 years later you're going to be interviewing the guy that you put in your girlfriend's fake newsletter. With no further ado, welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello, friends. Today on the show, he spent more than 25 years in the newspaper business and today is an award-winning author of multiple detective stories. His own series, helmed by protagonist Aristotle Socarides, is a fantastic deep dive, pun intended, into the world of a local Cape Cod private eye with enough charisma and character to fill 8 books and a possible 9th. He also co-authored the NUMA Files series with legendary adventure novelist Clive Cussler. He's a family man born and raised in New England, and when asked about his family, says, quote, "We have a total of 3 children and 7 granddaughters who are, naturally, the most beautiful and intelligent young ladies on the face of the planet." At 81, he's still writing, and in my opinion, is as charming as the characters he's created. It's my honor to welcome, zooming in from a sometimes spotty internet connection on Cape Cod, author Paul Kemprecos. Paul, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much.
Let's dig in. Tell the fine people where you were born and raised.
I was born in Brockton, Massachusetts. Brockton was a city south of Boston. It's famous for its shoe factories, which supplied, going back, soldiers in the Civil War, then the other wars, and its professional boxers like Rocky Marciano, and it was a very ethnic city growing up. A lot of immigrants came there, like my father came from Greece to work in the shoe factories, and later on, being Greek, he went into the restaurant business. It was a good place to grow up. It's had its issues since then, unfortunately.
So what was it like for you growing up as a kid?
There's the old oak and bucket syndrome. How dear to my something or other scenes of my childhood with fond recollection recalls them to view. So basically, you remember the good parts, but not the bad part.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was a good city to grow up in. That exposed me to various other ethnic groups and instilled tolerance. The incentive was to not work in the shoe factory. So the generational change was quite startling sometimes, where sons and daughters of immigrants who had come over after World War II went on to become doctors and lawyers, or to run gas stations, or to work in the trades, and you could make a living back then. So it was a good, and it was a nurturing place in many respects. And everyone was kind of in the same boat. There were a few wealthy people and a few poor people, but most of the people were just working people. So it was a good place to go up.
Did you have a big family, brothers and sisters, or are you an only child?
I have my brother is deceased, the older brother. My sister lives in Baja, Mexico, and Baja, California. She's been in Mexico for almost over 40 years. She loves it down there. That's it. I have my dear wife, Christy, and we have 7 granddaughters between us.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Very proud of them. And then we have a bit of an extended family with her family, and my family has grown through the years, and I think we're adding on faster than we're losing.
Well, that's good. Are any of your kids or grandkids into writing?
No, my son is a lobbyist for big drug companies, and he works in Abu Dhabi. In Dubai, and commutes home. And some of what he does, I think, has to do with writing, get the corporation favorably disposed. My daughter is in banking. None of the kids are, none of them. They all do some writing to a certain extent, but none of them are into writing.
Did you or you and your family travel growing up?
No one really traveled. No one had the money to travel. And it was a big deal to go to Boston, go to Fall River or New Bedford for the clothing outfits. Or we would go to New York City to see my grandmother. But that was the extent of it. I didn't really start traveling until I was probably in my mid-30s. And we have traveled quite a bit since then.
And was there any particular experience growing up that made you want to be a writer?
I think it was Ernest Hemingway. Someone asked him what the best qualification was to be a writer, and he said an unhappy childhood. So my parents divorced. Divorce wasn't that common back then. You just stuck with your partner and all the misery, but it was for the good of the kids and everything else. So I was the youngest of the third. I was kind of, my sister is she's 80. Yeah, she's about 7 years older than I am. So I read a lot, and maybe that's what sparked my interest in writing. And thinking about it, I got into science fiction. I remember I read a lot of books having to do with the sea and fishes. And maybe that's something that set the stage for later in life and the interest in the sea. Closer we would go to the sea would be Nantasket Beach, which had an amusement park called Paragon Park, or if you're from Massachusetts, Paragon Park. So that was kind of the extent. I read vociferously. My sister married early. My brother was drafted into the Army. So I read a lot. I think part of it was to get away from bad family situation that always attends every divorce. There's always, I think it falls on the youngest too, the one who hears the arguments and all that. So Maybe Hemingway was right, maybe he was wrong. But I just have always been a reader.
What was your first professional job as a writer?
Well, I was in the newspaper business for 25 years, and I went to Boston University School of Journalism, photojournalism. So I came out of school thinking that I might get a job as a photographer. And so my first was, I worked for a little publication as an intern called the Hellenic Chronicle. It was a Greek American. That was a bit of a baptism of fire, having to deal with all those long names. Then my first job out of college was for a newspaper called the Cape Cod, and I was there just for that summer. And then I went to work for about 4 or 5 years for a daily newspaper, the Cape Cod Standard Times. And then I went back to the Cape Cod, and I was there for 20 years. I was a reporter, photographer, did the darkroom work. I was managing editor, then the editor of the Business Journal, and that was that. And then there are a lot of changes going on at the paper, and I wasn't part of them, but I had already started. I had already had a contract to do my first 2 books by then, the private eye books. So I kind of segued into that. It was a little difficult making the change, but I did that. It was going to be a 6-month plan. I'd work for 6 months and see where it went. And I'm still on the 6 months plan. Or maybe it's a 3 months. As I get older, it's a 3 months plan.
That's funny. What do you like most about writing?
Writing the end at the end. I had a kid in my granddaughter's elementary school that asked me the same question, and I said the same thing. When it's all over, that's the best part. Writing is hard. Everything is hard, but writing is difficult. You have to persuade yourself that what you're doing is worthwhile, and so that's a bit of a part of a head game. I just say to people, when it's going well, it's a lot of fun. It's when it goes right along and the words are coming out. When it's not going well, then it's a struggle. It's painful and miserable. Yeah. It's just very hard to live with. So, but I like the idea of developing a story. I like the idea that I'm entertaining people. I'm writing escapism, that people might have a tough time at work or at home or something or other. The whole week has been lousy, and they can pick up a book that I've written and escape for 2 or 3 or 4 hours.
Absolutely. Or several days.
Yeah. I've had people come up to me and say, yeah, you changed my life. And you got me through a difficult period in my time. You know, my parents were sick, or I've had people come up and say, just thank me, and were given no reason whatsoever. So I got them through. So that has been there's a lot of satisfaction for that.
I was going to ask you if you've ever considered quitting, and if yes, what kept you going?
Oh, sure.
But it sounds like that's one of those things that might have kept you going, is the people telling you what a difference you've made.
Yeah, it's kind of a joke in our family. I wrote the first 6 books in the Aristotle Socarides series, and I got to a point where the advances were getting smaller and it was getting more difficult to sell. And later on, my agent apologized for abandoning me. And I never considered it that way, but I think probably it was something like that. And I was just not going to write books. I couldn't make any money at it, and they were too hard. And so I was going to do other stuff. And so I was doing PR stuff and freelance, which pays terrible. Yeah. And then I got a call from Clive Cussler, who's a best-selling adventure writer, and I had been in contact with him over a number of years, and he really liked my books, and he wanted to incorporate that character into a new concept that he and the publisher, Simon & Schuster, are considering. It's called the NUMA Files.
NUMA Files, yeah.
He said, told his story before, he said, I would do all the work, and he would get all the money. And I said, oh, that sounds like a good deal. And I drove over to my wife's office, and I said, Clive Cussler just called me up, and he wants me to do a series with him. She said, well, what did you say? I said, yeah, but I said, I don't know if I could do it. I've been writing a regional detective series, first person, and the custom books are set all over the world, the yellow teeth villains and high body count. And so she said, well, yeah, of course you can do it. And then she said, well, what else are you going to do? So at that point, the inescapable logic, I started the first book. It was a sharp learning curve. And that was a bestseller. And all the NUMA Files, the 7 NUMA Files that followed are all bestsellers. One of them was New York Times bestseller, beat out the Da Vinci Code, which was fun because my first editor on a Cussler book had gone on and become Dan Brown's editor. So we had been in contact through the years. And I said, ha, ha, ha.
I was going to tell you my condolences. I know Clive Cussler passed away earlier this year.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Are you going to continue writing any more of the NUMA books, or is that done now?
No, I kind of fizzled out. There was a lot of pressure, and they wanted a book a year, and I sustained that schedule for the first few years, but it just became more difficult for me. And and they're formula books, which is a good thing because that's what readers come to expect. At the same time, I was getting tired of the formula. So that collaboration ended on a friendly basis. I did a book, when I talked to Clive's agent, and I said, well, I don't know what to do next. What should I do next? And he said, why don't you write an adventure book? And I said, oh, okay, I know how to do that. And then I talked to Clive, and what should I do next? And he said, well, why don't you write a Socarides book? Sock, which is a nickname of my detective. Yeah. So I said, that's a good idea. So I wrote an adventure book with a different hero called Matt Hotkins, and he's a Woods Hole oceanographic engineer, ex-SEAL, and it was a very Cussler-esque book. And then I did, after 15 years, I brought Socarides back in Gray Lady. And then I did another adventure book, Matt Hotkins, and then I did another Socarides book. So now I wanted to try something different. So I've done a standalone book with featuring a female protagonist, and it has to do. She's an art historian, and she uncovers a World War II secret in a work by the artist Edward Hopper. So hopefully that's kind of in the works, and it's going through final edits, but I don't have a publication date on that.
Well, question for you on the Socarides books, because that's how I obviously came to know you, and they're just so fantastic, and the character's great, and the books are great. And I just love them. So, are you done with him? Is there going to be a swan song? Are we gonna get another sock book out of you?
Well, getting back to the quitting thing, I wrote once a month. I threatened. I said, I'm done. No, I'm not going to write any more books. Too hard. Not worth it. And this has been going on for several years now. And then I end up writing a book again. So after we spent some time in Arizona, and we extended our stay out there because of the COVID hadn't really hit out there, and it was hitting in Massachusetts at the time. And so I had kind of finished the work on Killing Icarus, which is a standalone book. And I started fiddling around with a Socarides book. And I kind of glossed over he's got this aggravating Greek family that drives him crazy, and his mother wants him to do something. I said, well, but I never really explained her Cretan roots. And I thought, what if he goes to Crete and has to deal with a family issue over there? So I started working with that, and I rewritten the first part of it a few times, but I'm into it, and we'll see where it goes.
Awesome.
And when I worked with Cussler, he was always threatening to quit. He said, this is my last book. And then his agent would say, oh, no, I know him. He said, so 30, he wrote another 30, or he wrote a co-author, another 30 books after that.
Wow.
Us writer persons, we're full of it. Don't believe it where we say.
Well, how much of you is in Sock, and how much of Sock is in you?
Well, Sock, I think, was 6'1", and he's got a full head of hair. He's an ex-Marine with a Vietnam background. He's a diver. I did get my dive certification when I started working on the books, just so I could talk in the nomenclature. And so I would know how it felt to go underwater.
Yeah.
So the things that editors like is a voice, a distinct voice. And that's hard to define. It's kind of the way a character looks at the world, like Sherlock Holmes has this fascination with evil and science and things like that. Yeah, who else? Jack Reacher, the popular Lee Child books. He's a tough guy. He comes into town and runs afoul of some situation, and he ends up mopping up the town with the bad guys. So he's got a way of looking at things. So that's what Sock was. He's a good guy. He tries to do the right thing. Sometimes he doesn't. He has issues going back to Vietnam and then other personal issues. So these interplay. We used to be wise. I used to be a kind of a wiseacre. But when I worked for the newspapers, I think it was part of the job description. And but so I little that, and he's kind of looks. I always felt sympathized with the little guy. He's a character. He does that. I didn't really think about it, but I did a talk a couple of years ago at a bookstore, and I was just rambling on like this. We were talking about sharks, which was a concept in my latest book, and the bookstore proprietor said, oh, well, you kind of talk like him. And so I always thought of him, when I first started writing, I thought of him as a John Cassavetes type, kind of a little crazy because of his war things, very intense, and doesn't like baloney, the polite word for it. So maybe that's a little bit of me. And I don't think any writer can keep his or her background out of the characters that they write. But obviously, I'm not a tough guy, and neither is he. I didn't want him to be hard-boiled. I wanted to be semi-hard-boiled. I think that's what appealed to people. They didn't like the hard-boiled.
Well, what goes into your plot ideas, and how do you come up with those?
After the first one, which was difficult to write, having come from the newspaper business to something completely different, and I went back and forth. My editor on that one, she didn't like the first part. She didn't like the characters, settings, and plot. So at the time, I thought maybe it was a big mistake. I should have stayed in the newspaper business. But we persevered. And that book was called Cool Blue Tome.
Yeah, because great book.
I hope I made all my mistakes on that. I know I didn't, But that ended up winning a Shamus Award as best paperback novel from the Private Eye Writers of America. And then in the second book, When I Met You, it was set in Woods Hole, and the editor said, I think you should bring something back from Sauk's past that messes up his life. And I thought, well, he was in Vietnam, and what would be better than to have someone from Vietnam that he met over there? So I cooked up the character of John Flagg, who's a Wampanoag Indian from Martha's Vineyard, and he's a CIA spook now. And I had the idea that they meet again, and they have kind of a bad relationship going back to Vietnam. They were friends, then became enemies, and they meet again, and they find themselves having to work together on a case. So this is good because it set up the tension between them. Mm-hmm. You try to make your characters not all good or all bad, then they become characters. And this setting in Woods Hole was fun. It's people who are not familiar with Woods Hole might not know it's a center of world ocean science. It's the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, which is the equivalent of Scripps out on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And there's marine biological labs and all kinds of stuff there. So.
Well, speaking of science and technology, how has the invention of digital media, ebooks, Kindle, Amazon, all this stuff changed your career?
Well, there have been some major changes in the market since I started. Development of ebooks was one of them. And the biggest one is the ascendancy of Amazon, which now I think controls something like 70% of the sales of the books and has an impact on everything. And the consolidation of publishing business, where some of the companies have been merged, the writers, I understand the advances aren't as big except for the really big writers. So ebooks flattened out, but with the pandemic, there's been a bump in sales in ebooks. And I was just reading the other day, there was a bump in sales of print books. So much, in fact, that they're having a problem printing them fast enough. That's become a real problem. So all the digital stuff, another aspect of it is that it's providing more competition for what you're doing. So when your book comes out, it's part of many, many things vying for the reader's attention. As they got their smartphone, they get all the stuff that's available on a smartphone. They got Netflix, they got streaming, everything is going on. So it's become a tougher business in that respect. But at the same time, you can also expand your readership if you're savvy in this and able to do that. So that's kind of what that is.
Have any of your books ever been optioned by Hollywood?
Way back when, my very first book, I got an option. I might have even gotten 2 options, and which basically means they put a hold on it for a certain, but they pay you, put a hold on it for a certain amount of time. And Hollywood's a whole different animal than the New York publishing scene. I don't know. I'm still hopeful that it would be nice if something like that happened, or for TV series.
Well, Hollywood needs to get on the ball, because I think that the Sock books would make a fantastic TV show. I really do.
Oh, thanks. I think they have good, intriguing plots for the most part. But maybe after I'm gone, my wife will be able to reap something from it. But it would be nice if something happened before that. It's very difficult. My publisher told me recently that I have to do more promotion and marketing. And in doing research on it, it's a whole new world out there. You need a platform. You have to brand yourself. You're looking for a target audience. You're using BookBub. You're using Facebook. You're using everything else in order to make yourself stand out from the pack. So, if you hadn't been a writer, what do you think you would have done with your life? I would probably have gone back in the newspaper business. I think probably in a community newspaper level. I think it was great fun working in the community newspapers. You get instant feedback from what you're doing. You're helping things along. Maybe you change things once in a while. Some of it is considered zoning, boring, I suppose, with zoning and Board of Appeals. But there's a lot of drama that goes on, and you can get the chance to do nice things for people. You put a wedding announcement in, or write something about someone's kid getting out of college, or a local business. defying the odds and doing well. So that's just very gratifying. I might be doing something else like working in a boatyard. The other joke in my family is how like I said, I'm going to quit writing and go get a job with a ferry service that goes back and forth from Hyannis to Nantucket. I get a uniform and a whistle and a badge. So maybe someday after I retire.
Well, as a successful novelist, what do you want to say to other writers out there that might be listening to the podcast?
Well, you really need, if you expect to get anywhere, is you need to persevere. I think I've heard it called grit. That when you're writing, there are all these thoughts that go around in your head, these insecurities that, you got instead of the little devil and the angel over here,
yeah.
a little gnome or troll saying, that's crap, that's all right. You shouldn't even be doing this. You should be walking dogs or something like that. And so you got to go, brush them off and persevere. And even if you're not getting published right away, and they always say, write for yourself. Yeah, that's true, but it's still a business. You're writing a product that you hope someone will pay to get. Say that you write for yourself. It might end up being literature and end up in a basement somewhere gathering dust. Technically speaking, I would advise writers, just to know their characters. Once they are aware of, they know the characters from top to bottom, that becomes easier for you to insert them into a story. The other thing I would say would be to educate yourself as to what's going on in the business, who the movers and shakers are, and what the means are for getting your books out there. And then try to have fun at it. It can be fun. It can even be profitable if you hit it right, or it might not be. The other aspect I didn't say is the rise of self-publishing as well. The independent publishing and self-publishing have become easier and more respectable. I belong to the International Thriller Writers, which is a great organization, and they early recognize that independence and self-publishing, that there's a place for those. So you don't discount them, because you might get some good products out of there. So some of the independents self-published are doing quite well, I'm told.
Well, you said you didn't grow up traveling, but you have traveled as an adult. So I'm curious, where have you traveled in the world, and do you have a favorite place or places?
We've traveled in some weird places. We traveled in France. We've been to Turkey twice. We're in Cyprus twice. Been in Switzerland. We've been in some European countries. Italy a couple of times. Greece, I would say Greece, not only because of my heritage on my father's side, but it's kind of a special place. We went there on a honeymoon. We've been back a few times since. We went to, I've been to Crete 3 times. My wife, Christy, and I have been to Crete twice, and that's Greek, but it's also a different island. It's a beautiful, rugged island. In fact, I'm using it as a backdrop for some of my travels experiences over there, as a backdrop for the new sock book I'm working on. So I loved Italy because of the food and the wine and the culture. So we went to Santorini on our honeymoon, which is a volcanic island that they always show in the calendar art. And it's very touristy and busy, but it's really a spectacular place. And I would advise people to go there in the spring or the fall when it's not so crazy.
Going back to your childhood for a minute, you said you read a lot of books. I'm curious, did you have a favorite book, or are there some books that stood out for you as a kid?
Oh, gosh. I remember we were reading A Secret Garden in school, and I couldn't wait to get to the end of that. So I went out to the library and I got it. So I knew before any other kid in the class what The Secret was. I read a lot of science fiction. I read Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov. I read a ton of science fiction, and that may have had some interest. I read books having to do with the sea. I still like Joseph Conrad. I still like to read him once in a while, just because of his sense of the sea is marvelous. I don't know. At the same time, I read Sherlock Holmes. I read H.G. Wells, The Invisible Man. But it's a pretty eclectic thing. I don't know. There was one book I remember. It was a silly nature book. It had to do with each chapter was a kind of a discovery. These kids were discovering something. Someone was pointing out something about it. Maybe it was because they lived in a nice house out in the country, and I lived in an apartment in an industrial city that I was intrigued by that. I thought, yeah, that'd be nice to live out there. And so here I am on Cape Cod.
I'm curious, what do you think when you look back on the whole of your life so far?
Yeah, I'm in my 8th decade.
Yeah, in and of itself, that's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah. I got married very early. I had kids very early. I got married at the age of about 22 or so. I had my son and my daughter. So I had 2 kids by the time I was in my mid 20s. And I was working for newspapers, and so they didn't pay very well. So it was always a financial struggle. So maybe I would have branched out into public relations, and I'd be living on a fat pension from financial hedge fund or something like that. Or they were around back then. And then there's a period of ups and downs, and then when I met my current wife, that's when things really have been the best. It just seemed that you're still struggling to do this, and you have to worry about your health. But I don't know. I think it was great fun to work on the newspaper. I really enjoyed that every day. It was fun to go into work, even though my personal situation wasn't so great. I had that. I had my 2 kids, and 2 great kids, and they produced lovely granddaughters, and lovely and intelligent, I might add. Remember The Last Hurrah, Edwin O'Connor?
I'm afraid that one was a little before my time.
He was Frank Skeffington, who was this Irish politician in Boston. It was modeled on Michael J. Curley, who was this corrupt and a politician, mayor, and congressman. And he's dying at the end of the book. Everyone comes into the room, and they said, "Oh, there he is. He's dying." And I suppose if he had it to do over again, he would do it differently. And Skeffington raises his head off the bed and says, "Like hell I would." Great, and that's the end of the book. And things aren't over yet. I hope I'm still going to be productive. My daughter was asking me last night about, when are you going to retire? And I said, well, I don't know. I complain about it, and the work is hard. I like still producing, being in the game of writing when it goes well. I think from mentally it's challenging, so that's a good thing as you get older, so that your brain does. I think if I stopped writing, I would become stupid, and I'd go out and I would volunteer somewhere, or I might even get a job, or I don't know what I would do. I don't play golf, so I don't have that to waste my time at.
And you're 81 now?
I'm 81, yeah. I'm still active. I still ski. We skied some heavy mountains out west last year, and we do boating and hiking whenever we can.
Do you have any wisdom from 81 that you want to impart on the world?
What I would give the world? I don't know. Have more fun. Don't waste your time. When we remarried, when I remarried, I was middle aged, and one of the things I thought, I look around and I see couples who in particular, who are just wasting their time in hassles, just doing stuff that makes a mess of their lives. And as you get older, you say, well, there's not that much time left, so you should really do your best to make it count.
Yeah.
And when we got married, we said, my wife was still she's a bit younger than I am, and we said, let's live 3 years. For every year they were married, we'll live 3 years. So that's what the period we still have to work and painful stuff like that, but try to have fun and don't worry about things. So I'm the world's biggest worrier, so don't count that coming from me.
I think that's really good advice, actually. Live 3 years for every year. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a Greek man, do you make your own souvlaki?
Yeah, I can do a souvlaki. I do some Greek. Well, I do one that's fairly simple. It's called sariplaki. It's fish like cod or haddock, and you make a sauce with tomato and onion and garlic, or various vegetable dishes that are very good. Just a side note, when I started writing the Socarides books, I was living alone, and I was cooking up some very weird stuff. Just weird combinations of Velveeta and all kinds of stuff. So I put that in the book. Sock would make himself a dinner, or something heavy on the feta cheese, and then some of the editors were saying, "Oh, that's fun," because Robert Parker was writing the Spencer series, and Spencer is this detective. He's a big gourmet cook, and he goes into detail about all that. And this was such an antithesis of what they were writing, and that he was producing this this goober stuff. And my friend Phil Craig on the Vineyard was including, his detective was also a gourmet cook. In fact, he and his wife Shirley would include recipes for some of the stuff they did, and they eventually put out a cookbook. If I did a cookbook, I don't know. It would not be stuff that a lot of people heavy on the olive oil and the feta.
That's hilarious. All right, I have a political question for you.
Sure.
If you were elected president of the United States today, what are the first three things you would do?
First three things. I try to get everyone to simmer down and stop going at each other. I'd make a list of all the awful people that are now in our government in positions of power, in a position to affect people's lives and in many ways to hurt people. And I would show them the door, and I would try to bring the country together. It's very, very polarized right now. And part of that is because we've got these stuff that goes back for as long as you've been a country, and some of it is a political calculation where certain parties and certain people are just driving us apart because it's easier to achieve their own aid. And I would try and unify the country that way. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I'd have to make a list for it. Everybody make a list of all the things that have to be done, like getting this COVID thing under control.
Yeah.
So that's all very vague notions, but in one sense, I think it would be difficult because of things that have happened, and other ways it would be easy because I think that we inherently know what to do, and once we start going at each other's throats, that it will become a lot easier. As a writer, you become an amateur psychologist. You're looking at people's minds, and you also become a student of history. And I can see disturbing trends that we should have learned from in the past, that we really should get a hold of ourselves and come together as a country. Easier said than done.
Well, Paul, one of my favorite questions to ask on the show, and I like to do slight variations of it, is if you could sit with anybody from human history, alive or dead, except for any kind of prophets like Jesus, Muhammad, or Moses, etc., and your own family, who would you sit with, and what would you like to talk about?
Well, it probably wouldn't be the standard ones like Gandhi. And it would probably be another writer, not a politician or a saint, or maybe someone like Charles Dickens. And I'd say, how do you turn out all those books? You were using a quill pen, and I've got a computer. And you turn out these wonderful books that really examine human nature and tragedy and success and all that. Charles Dickens would go to a nice English pub somewhere and talk about things. He was very socially minded, as you can see, in describing poor houses and awful people, as well as people who rose above it. I could sit down with other writers and we would discuss the craft, because it's more of a craft, I think, than an art. Well, it's an art form too, but it's very craft. How do you take one word and put it in front of the other, and so that they make sense, and that people want to read them, and that they educate, and that they entertain? We all know the same words. We all know, we're all born with, we all learn the same words. Hemingway would be fun, although I don't know if I could outdrink him. But I'm a skier. He was a skier. That might be fun to go skiing with Hemingway, although I'm sure he could be quite a bore talking about himself, but that would be okay.
What is your guilty TV watching pleasure?
Oh, we watched Westworld. We watched Schitt's Creek. We were watching really good stuff like Ozarks, but it was very intense. And then we said, we got to do something lighter. So we went over to Schitt's Creek, and then we got into Westworld, which it's a great concept, but it kind of got out of line. I don't know. I like drama. When my wife isn't here, I'll watch World War II stuff. I love the technical stuff about the big tanks and howitzers and weapons and stuff like that. Even though I'm not a gun person,
yeah,
but I'm fascinated by World War II, having lived as a very small child through part of it. So I'll watch that.
How long do you think you'd like to live?
Well, my sister's 88, and she's still going strong. I used to joke with Cussler, and I'd say, Clive, he would complain. He'd say, oh, they won't let me retire. And I'd say, well, I can't retire until you retire because you're older than I am. And I would come across as a wuss. So now he's not there. I guess I have a pass to retire. I don't know. It all depends on how healthy. If you're miserable and unhealthy, you don't want to live very long. But theoretically, you could live to be 100 and be healthy. But I don't know, 90. 90 is not that far away right now. I'll go for 100, and 100 and most of it healthy as possible. But after you lose your hearing and your teeth and your sight and your brain begins to go at the point where you become a burden on people and make everyone miserable. Oh, that might be fun being around and being able to make people miserable. They can't do it. Think to yourself. Oh, he's back in his wheelchair. Let's strip the rubber off his wheelchair and see how that takes him.
Hilarious. If you could go back in time and talk to, let's say, 25-year-old Paul, what would you want to say to your 25-year-old self?
Oh God. 25 years. Man, I was so stupid. And I might be a little more focused about life and goals and all that because I tended to kind of let things happen. And maybe I would say, well, this is what I want to do. Or I might have said, oh, I want to be a writer. Well, how do I become a writer? Because that's where I ended up. But I detoured through journalism. And now some of the writers I know, they seem to have started writing right out of the crib. And I would have probably started writing because I had it in me. I kind of knew those stories, and I like good writing, but I never had the confidence, self-confidence to do stuff myself. And that goes back to childhood, I think. So I would start doing what I want to do earlier on. Then you get into things like try to make a living, try to pay the rent, the kids, having to deal with all that, and the good parts and the bad parts. So yeah, I might just tell my 25, just have fun.
For sure.
The hell with it all. But then I would have burned out by the age of 26.
What is your spirit animal?
We have 2 cats, and if I ever be reborn, it would be to be born as a cat because all they do is eat and sleep, and have human beings wait on them. We're servants to these silly cats, so they don't really do anything. They don't catch mice or anything. So maybe that would be my spirit, something in the cat family.
Very good. Well, Paul, the last thing we do on the show is a little game I have called 299 Questions with Moonbird. I have 299 questions here that I've assembled from friends, family, and the internet. You get to pick 2 questions. So what 2 numbers would you like me to read you?
Oh, okay. I'll do multiples of 3. I just go, say, how about 3 and 9?
Okay.
Because there's a lot of strength in 3, the triangle, the trinity, all that, and then 9 to multiple just for that. What are the questions?
Well, let's find out. Number 3, what smell do you love?
Oh, I'd say smell of Italian food or garlic, and something savory like that, tomatoes and onions. So, I don't know. Is that Freudian? Is that,
who cares? It's delicious.
Yeah, I got. Wow, I like that. I like flowers, of course, but as everyone does. But I think that the sense of smell is the strongest because you can go out and you'll get a whiff of something, and it'll bring your mind back 30 years to when you smelled that, and when you were. If I smell diesel now, I might think of Europe because of all the diesels in Paris or London, someplace like that. So. It's the sense of smell is very evocative, in my opinion.
I totally agree. Number 9, what profession other than writing would you like to attempt?
Ooh, I don't know, something that got me outside. I like the ocean, so maybe something to do with the ocean. Even though we spent part of the year in the desert, not teaching so much, but a guide of some kind. Maybe something in the arts, because I like art, but I'm not an artist.
Well, how about a museum curator?
That would be fun.
Yeah,
museum curator. I'd like to. Some of the corporations have these guys that go out, these people that go out, and they give them a blank check, and they say go and buy art. So that would be fun. I was something where I traveled would be fun. Traveling around the world in some capacity. I keep coming back to the writing thing because it's been such a big part of my life.
Yeah.
I'm not an athlete. I'm not financially acute. So something involved travel, something involved art. I don't know. I'd have to find a job or a rich wife to support my whims.
Well, what do you think is the purpose of art?
Well, originally a lot of the art was to educate because it was like reading comic books for the masses. They were illiterate, and the church was in its ascendancy at the time. And this is how the church and a lot of art, as we know, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, was church art, and they told a story. I think it still has education purposes. It tells you something. Maybe it'll tell you a story, and it's to make you feel better. I think I could look at a picture and say, well, wow. For me, I like to look at pictures of times past that with people in them because it connects me with the past. This is how people lived, how they dressed, the fact that people loved and had children and or were at war. Just things that don't change. So otherwise, it's unless you watch a BBC production. You don't really know how people live. So I enjoy looking at that. Even back to, I was traveled to Egypt years ago and I ended up in one of the tombs. And there was one of the way down deep in the tomb, one of the artists had made a mistake in red and he had corrected it in black or so. And I identified with that. I think artists make our lives a little bit more tolerable because life can be very difficult. And if we have the beauty of art to sustain us, they're really helps. So there are artists as a big way of making our lives more tolerable.
Well, if you don't mind, I have just 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
1, overall, what do you think is the meaning of life?
I don't have a clue. I really don't know. It's just beyond my ken. I just put one foot in front of the other and hope I don't trip. But I had a book once that it was on the mind-boggling cosmos, and got to do with the creation of the universe. And my always thing is, all right, well, the universe was created in the Big Bang, whether you believe it was a religious event or a physical event, but it was created. I always thought, what was before that?
Yeah.
And the book I read said, well, maybe time didn't exist. And I thought that was time for me to get out of it because that was so beyond what I could understand. I'm just a dumb ink-stained wretch, so I don't have any I don't have all the answers, although I may make them up, though. Make you think I do.
As a good writer should make them up, right? My last question for you is a 2-parter.
Yeah.
Part 1, years from now, after you're gone, what do you hope people say about you?
Well, don't forget me. Maybe I'll steal from Clive Cussler's epitaph, which was, "This has been a blast. I assume the party will continue elsewhere." But what would I like to say? Well, he was a good writer. He was a good newspaper man. He helped make a difference and maybe help some people in their lives. Good father, good grandfather, and all that stuff that goes with it.
Well, that segues beautifully into part 2 of this question, which is in the future, after you're gone. What would you want to say to your children and grandchildren when they reminisce and listen back to this podcast, but in the future?
I would just say I've been so blessed and I'm so lucky and so fortunate that even though my life has taken a number of detours, that I feel so lucky that I had 2 great kids. I have 7 wonderful, intelligent, as I say, the most intelligent young women on the planet. I have a terrific wife who's made such a difference in my life. And I've met a few awful people. I tried to avoid awful people, but most of the people in my life, I've been quite thankful that I know them. And so I thank them for being my friends, and I thank my family for being my family. Just a humble kid from Brockton, Massachusetts, who worked in the shoe factories for 2 weeks, and that was enough.
Well, Paul, sincerely, I can't thank you enough for being here. You are just wonderful.
I got to my wife. Did you hear that? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's very nice. Those are very, very thoughtful questions, and they're hard questions to think about. Is particularly as a writer, you're just projecting fake lives onto paper, and so you don't think about yourself that often, except when you're messing around with your own imagination as a tool to get you where you're going. So thank you for that. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, thank you. And truly, it's been my honor. So thanks again. And please take care of yourself.
You too. Take care. And thank you very much.
Finest kind, sir.
Finest kind, Cap.
Friends and listeners, go read Paul's books because they are awesome. They are available at every major book retailer in the world and, of course, online wherever ebooks are sold. While you're downloading Paul's ebooks, you can also head over to patreon.com/Moonbird and show your support for the show, which I really appreciate. And if you'd like even more Moonbird than that in your life, and hey, who wouldn't? Head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media at memoriesofamoonbird. Yasu!